Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Vin Malkowski. I'm the current president of the Museum of Natural History, and we're very glad to welcome you here tonight to hear Greg. Greg Skomal is a senior scientist with Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries. He's also affiliated with University of Dartmouth and Woods Hole, and does a lot of work. You may have seen him on TV once or twice. Greg has been working with sharks a very large portion of his life, and even though he's well known for white shark work, he's worked with a lot of different species and has a lot of great information. So, since you're here to see Greg, I'm going to get out of your way. Greg Skomal.
Is this working? No.
Push it down.
It was until I picked it up. But you still want me to use it. Is that loud enough? No. You can hear it, all right? Who's that? Keep pushing the button, it'll go on. Thank you.
The kid was playing with it before the show.
We're not battery. All right, how loud can you speak?
Oh, I can scream. Just ask my kids. Yeah, Vinny, very short intro. I liked it. Unusual for you. Thank you so much. And flattering, no doubt. That doesn't happen too much either. But I appreciate it. And I appreciate you inviting me to speak to the museum. It has been, I've done it before, but I want to say it was at least 7 or 8 years ago. Because my wife and I were not living in Marion at the time. We were living on Martha's Vineyard, and we moved here about five and a half years ago. And now that I'm here, Vinny found it pretty easy to get me to come and speak. And a lot has happened in those bunch of years. We were back in those days. I did a much broader talk on the shark research we were doing, which involved a lot of species, from the smaller dogfishes we see here in Massachusetts to the big basking sharks, blue sharks, makos. We were really heavily involved, and still are to some degree, in the study of those species. But in 2009, we had this occurrence of white sharks, and our ability to actually go out and find them literally exploded. So what this talk is going to center on is the research that we started. And I say 2009, but we have been compiling data on white sharks going back decades. We just couldn't find them. And so I'm going to talk about the work we started, the sophisticated tagging. So this story is almost as much about the technology that we're using as it is about this species. So I want particularly the younger people in the room to see that how easy they've got it now compared to when I was a kid, right? And so the technology really has morphed and evolved remarkably quickly over the 30-year span I've been working on shark species. Up until the mid-80s, virtually everything we knew about white sharks came from these little green dots. And what these little green dots show us is the distribution of this species. These are data points that we've compiled dating back to as far as the early 1800s. So this is everything we could say about white shark distribution. And most of these little dots are white sharks that were captured by fishermen over the years and brought to the dock, or scientists that went out and were lucky enough to find white sharks. But most of the time it's fisheries interactions with white sharks. And although it shows a fairly clean distribution from the eastern Gulf of Mexico, along the eastern seaboard of the United States, all the way up into Canadian waters, also a green dot in Bermuda, a couple in the Caribbean, we can see that it may also reflect where fishermen are actually fishing and not necessarily the distribution of the white shark. And it doesn't tell us anything about how this animal actually lives. When I say how it lives, I mean its age, its growth, its maturity, where it spends its time, its movement patterns, its migration, its fine scale and broad scale behavioral patterns. Those kinds of things you don't learn from a bunch of little green dots. Looks like a lot of little green dots, and I can tell you there's 618 of them. But if you think of the span of time upon which it represents these animals, and if I were to take these dots and separate them by individual years, you find out some years there's no dots, and other years there's as many as 2 or 3. It's because white sharks have been always very, very elusive to us. And even though fishermen occasionally interact with them, it has not been easy for scientists to go out and study them. And as a result, if you can't study an animal, if you can't find it, you don't know anything about it. And so the white shark's really been shrouded in mystery in this part of the world. Now that's not to say some of these little green dots have not been brought back to the dock, and scientists have had a chance to study them. And I'm a classically trained fisheries biologist, coming out of the University of Rhode Island and working at the National Marine Fisheries Service for several years. And really old school technology in those days was get a dead fish and cut it open to learn from it. And you can learn a lot from a dead fish. So here's a really small white shark that we cut open back in the 80s when I was working at with the feds. And you know, when you cut open a shark, some of the stuff is very obvious. You look at its stomach, you get a sense of what it's been eating. Right? You look at other organs, you can tell whether it's mature or immature. What's not so obvious is if you take a section of its backbone, cut it up, look at under a microscope, you can see banding patterns, and those banding patterns actually are similar to those like in a tree, and you can actually age the animal, so you can come up with a growth curve. So you can get some really basic life history information from these animals by cutting them open. And so we've looked at little white sharks, and we've looked at a few big white sharks. And this is about a 3,000-pound male that was harpooned off the coast of New York. But even so, we didn't get all those little green dots. We didn't get 600 or so. We only got up to about 60 or 70 of them over the course of the last several decades. And we still don't know anything about their behavior, even though we're getting a sense of perhaps their growth rates, maybe their size at maturity. We know nothing about their reproductive behavior, the number of young that females have, at what size they matured, big females. We don't know anything about that. And where do they go to give birth to their young? These are the basic questions that we know a lot about from other species of fish. Striped bass, I can tell you all there is to know about striped bass, right? It's a species we have a lot of access to. You can even say the same thing about blue sharks, mako sharks, codfish, certainly, a number of species. White sharks, always been shrouded in mystery. The only paper published on the movements, the behavior of white sharks was done based on work by Frank Carey in 1979. 1979, I graduated from high school. And Frank Carey was building these very sophisticated tags in his laboratory at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And I got to meet Frank Carey when I was in college and actually go in his lab and go to sea with him. And I thought he was one of the most fascinating, strangest people I've ever met. Most scientists are. And he used to build these tags, and he used to put them on animals, and he would follow them, and he'd look at what they're doing in three-dimensional space. So he was the only person to ever track a white shark up until he did this. And he put one of these sophisticated transmitters, and we call these acoustic transmitters. And I'll talk a lot about acoustic tags as we get later in the program, because we use a lot of those now. And the technology that he was actually building in his laboratory has now exploded into technology built and manufactured commercially. And so Frank went out, he heard this rumor of a dead whale about 30 miles off the coast of Long Island. And when there's a dead whale, typically white sharks are attracted to it, because white sharks like to feed and scavenge on dead whales. And the rumors were there was a couple of white sharks feeding on it. So he went out there, and sure enough, there were white sharks feeding on this whale carcass, and he put this tag in it, and he followed the shark for 3.5 days. And it went from one end of Long Island to the next. And I want you to see that track. That little yellow track represents the pioneering efforts of Frank Carey as he followed this white shark from one end of Long Island to the other. Now this was monumental work. All right, this was the world saw this and said, wow, what is this technology? It's really cool. Now probably half the kids in this room could build one of these tags based on what we have available to us today. But Frank was a pioneer, and it was a legendary paper that he published immediately, in a high-profile, peer-reviewed journal, and the scientific community loved it. And then the technology began to take off. But this was the only white shark ever tracked up until we started our work in 2009. in the Atlantic Ocean. And I put it on this broader map because I'm going to show you what we've done since then with the newer technologies. And it'll actually give you, so there's two maps I want you to remember. The one with all the little green dots that show the white shark hugging the coastline from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada, and this little map that was generated from Frank Carey's data back in 1979. And all this fish did, really, when he tracked it, was it moved from one end of Long Island to the other, diving up and down in the water column, which to me is really boring. But again, it was a landmark thing. But there are places in the world, and some of you have seen these things on TV, where you can go and dive with white sharks, you know, where filmmakers can go and film white sharks, where scientists have been studying white sharks literally for decades. And those we call global hotspots for white sharks. And they occur off the coast of California and South Australia, South Africa, certainly off the island of Guadalupe in Mexico. These are places where scientists and anyone else who wants to see a white shark, if they're willing to spend the money, on a predictable basis, on a seasonal basis, where white sharks are showing up in large numbers for a reason. And that reason is really quite simple. They're there to feed. And what they like to feed on looks like this. White sharks are a pretty interesting species. It's considered to be one of the top predators in the ocean. And really small white sharks like that one I showed you a photo of, really small white sharks like to primarily feed on fish. All right, schooling fish, fish that live on or close to the bottom, tiny fish, big fish. They eat all kinds of fish. But as they get bigger and more powerful, they get wider, their jaws get more muscular, their teeth change in shape from a sharply pointed tooth to a perfectly serrated cutting tool. And at that point in their lives, which is at about 9 feet in length, they're tired of chasing around little fish. And they're perfectly adapted for capturing, killing, and consuming food that looks like that. Right? Seals and sea lions, these are animals we call pinnipeds. And pinnipeds occur all over the world. And they also like to scavenge, as I already mentioned, dead whales. You know, and what they're targeting on these animals is that thick layer of fat, you know, blubber layer, because it's rich in lipids. It gives them lots of energy. It allows them to store energy. It allows them to grow quickly. So they really want to target that blubber layer on whales and on these seals and sea lions. So when Frank Carey wrote that paper back in 1979, what he concluded was, the reason we can't find white sharks is because we've already wiped out all the seal colonies here on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And he was absolutely right. Over the course of the 17, 18, and 1900s, we harvested seals off the northeastern U.S. at huge rates, huge rates. And one of those seals that we harvested was the gray seal. Here's a picture of a gray seal. This population of gray seals that occurs off the northeastern U.S. was reduced to something around 10,000 animals. Most of them lived off the coast of Canada on a tiny little island called Sable Island. Sable Island is not easy to get to. It's about 100 miles off the coastline of Nova Scotia. So they lived comfortably out there. It was a remnant population, and the population had been driven to the brink of extinction, as had harbor seals and harp seals. So a lot of folks growing up in New England nowadays, over the course of the last several decades, say, we never really saw a lot of seals, even though we are today. Is this a new thing? And I'm saying, not really. Seals are now rebounding after 40 years of protection. In 1972, we passed the Marine Mammal Protection Act. That act afforded seals and whales a huge level of protection. And as such, seal populations, since they're mammals, they reproduce really slowly, are now coming back and repopulating, and more importantly, recolonizing. So they have breeding colonies now all of the northeastern U.S., primarily from Massachusetts up to Canada and everywhere in between. So he's got these major breeding colonies, and we now have resident populations of seals. And who's walked around Sipacan Harbor or the mouth of the Wee Wee Annock or anywhere in Buzzards Bay in the winter and seen seals? I have. And you're seeing harbor seals and you're seeing gray seals. Now the harbor seals, this time of year, will leave and move and go back north. The gray seals will stay here. And if you stay here, your distribution overlaps pretty heavily with those little green dots. And as a result, because of this growing population of seals, and this is what it looks like now in parts of New England. Boy, people are getting nailed by the sun, huh?
Yeah.
I can make a phone call and try to get it to go down faster. But my wife to hold up a big piece of cardboard. Vinny, where's Vinny? Sorry about that, folks. If you want to move, don't be afraid. Just go ahead and move.
We've got other seats on this side.
Yeah, go ahead and move. I'm sorry. Yeah, don't be uncomfortable. So this is what a typical seal haul-out looks like now. And for those of you who go to Cape Cod very often, or maybe parts of Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, you will see these big haul-outs, and they're there year-round. Now they fluctuate a little bit seasonally, but they are still there. They're still resident seals. And their movements are not fully understood. But you can see, that's a whole lot of dinner. When you've got a whole lot of dinner, you've got animals that want to eat dinner. And this is why suddenly we have this emergence of white sharks on the coastline of Massachusetts each summer. Because the growing seal population has reached some threshold that's got the white shark going, I think I'm going to go check out that new cafe that's sitting out on Monomoy Point on the elbow of Cape Cod. And that's exactly what they're doing. So here we have some evidence that we've collected over the years. Some of it shot by my spotter pilot on the left, others from folks who were out on the water, and then carcasses we find on the beach. They're clearly evidence, very clear evidence, that white sharks are now coming to Massachusetts in predictable numbers, predictable time of year, to feed on seals. And now that has given scientists predictable access to the animals to the very first time, and here we are in the 21st century to start studying this species. And as such now, since 2009, we've gone from Frank Perry's single tag of a white shark off the coast of Montauk, New York, to now 80 white sharks that we have put tags on. And these are not just very simple acoustic tags like Frank was building, but highly sophisticated acoustic tags, satellite-linked tags that communicate with satellites not only as data loggers, but also in real time. So we can actually follow the movements of these animals online if you actually want to. So here's our location of tagging for those of you who are familiar with Cape Cod, and that's probably all of you. This is Monomoy Island Wildlife Refuge. It's down basically the elbow of Cape Cod. It's a fairly remote area, not a lot of humans there, and as such these seals pile up in huge numbers, and these sharks can access these animals fairly easily. So that allows us to access the sharks very easily. Our tagging method is fairly unique. Most people who tag white sharks around the world will set up a chum slick. Some of you may have seen the movie Jaws, and they set up a chum slick. And it works in a lot of parts of the world. You know, I've chummed in a lot of different sharks over the course of my career. We have found that white sharks, when in the presence of a giant cafe full of seals, have no interest in anything we can try to draw them in with. And so, if the sharks won't come to us, we have to go to them. And we go to them by finding them with a plane. That's our spotter plane right there. This is the southern tip of Monomoy, and this is the vessel that we've been using. And the vessel is provided to us by the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, a nonprofit group that we work with to raise funds and to conduct this research and promote education. So here you can see what's unique about the vessel is it's got a long pulpit on it. All right, the pointed nose on this boat is a pulpit, but it's a pulpit that's very close to the water. So I'm on the end of that pulpit, and I'm only about 4 feet over those sharks. And what the pulpit allows us to do is be able to sneak up on the animals without spooking them with the engines. So I'm out on the pulpit, the boat's behind me, and we can come up right on those animals, and while I'm over them, I can go ahead and tag them while they're free swimming. So we're not, for the most part, going to capture them, we're not handling them in any way, we're not wrestling them in any way, we're just going up on them, sneaking up on them, and piercing their ear, which does spook them to some degree. We place the tag at the base of the dorsal fin. So what I want to show you is we're also able to identify individual sharks. So every single shark that we encounter, I will videotape with a GoPro camera. Who's not heard of a GoPro camera? Right? They didn't exist a handful of years ago. Right? If I thought I could just take a camera this big, put it on a pole, and be able to videotape these sharks without having to jump in the water, I mean, that's really quite spectacular. So these sharks have individual markings. Think of it as color patterns. They're like fingerprints. And this is one of my favorite sharks. This is, I'm not sure, does this have a pointer?
Metal, the round button in the middle.
Oh, I don't want to do that. The round one?
Yep.
All right. Here you can see, I pointed in these arrows. This is Curly. Curly was a famous shark that we tagged in 2010 on a discovery film we made. And Curly has this very characteristic white color pattern on its second gill. And here you can see it here. So we videotaped these two sharks and later found out it was Curly. We can do this with almost every single shark as long as we get a video of them. So as such, we can not only get a sense of the number of sharks out there, the number of individual sharks. And we're using that to come up with a population size. And to give you some of our results from last year's work, kind of give you a sense of the numbers of sharks we're starting to see off the coast of east coast of Cape Cod. So our study area is primarily off of Orleans and Chatham. You're not moving around to other areas to do our work. You can see that in 2015, we identified 141 individual white sharks in that study area over the course of the summer. 41 of those we had seen the year before. So now we're learning the sharks coming back each year. That's a fairly high percentage of the sharks we identified the year before. We only identified 68 the year before. So we're seeing an increasing trend in the number of sharks. So that means 100 new sharks recruited to the area in that year. From 2014 to 2015. Here's a great example of what we may see in a given day. This is 4 individual white sharks off the coast of Monomoy Island. We've seen as many as 22 individual white sharks in a single day in that area. And we've been expanding our study area up toward P-Town where we're seeing other individuals as well. So part of our goal is to actually calculate a population size so that perhaps in 2 years when I speak here again, I'll tell you there's X number of white sharks off the coastline of Massachusetts these given years. All right? So basically what that involves is extrapolating that number up to the population size. And we're modeling that using a variety of different metrics. Let me show you some photos from 2015, most of which were captured by my spotter pilot, Wayne Davis. And although we're out there twice a week from June through October, you would probably see that we're watching sharks eat seals every day. And it's remarkable how little we actually do see. I can count on one hand, less than one hand. I think we're up to 4 different predation events that we've seen over the course of the last 6 years, which is remarkably low, thinking there's 140 sharks out here, there's lots of seals, we're going to sit here and just watch them eat, and that's not the way it works. This is one of those incidents that we captured and Wayne was able to photograph. Here's a case where a seal was swimming early in the season, meaning early July, was swimming off the beach at Monomoy. It was about a quarter of a mile out, and a shark had attacked it. The seal did not die immediately, and the shark simply followed it as it slowly bled to death. And this is their strategy. These sharks, which are not really rocket scientists, have figured out the fact that if you can bite a seal, render a large enough bite, it's going to bleed to death and you don't have to fight it anymore. And I'm going to, you'll see in some of my photos big scars on these sharks, and that's because these seals fight back, as anything would. And so in this case, this shark figured out that I'm just going to follow it until it bleeds to death, at which point it did, and then the shark ate it. We saw this happen twice. But come late July, early August, the seals figure out that swimming a quarter mile off the beach is not such a good idea. The emails go out, the memos, whatever it is, seals figure it out, and they start hugging the coastline. And you'll see on these photos that I begin to show you that they get very, very, very tight to shore. So one of the other predation events that we saw, we were able to film. We actually filmed 2 other ones. So I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you. Oh, there it is. Okay. This is a shark that we named Salty, and that's the tag in Salty's back. We tagged Salty in 2011. We were motoring along one day, and Salty decided to swim past us with a seal in its mouth. And I said, "Well, what do you got there?" And And then Salty came up and showed us. Yes, yes. The seal is dead. The seal is dead, and the shark is using the leverage of moving its head back and forth to tear chunks of flesh out of it in order to consume it. All right, so here you'll see it in slow motion. The shark's head completely out of the water with the seal's body as it tries to get that rich blubber layer and tear it off the body. And then I threw a decoy out to see if I could fool Salty into coming by, and I actually did it. But it took off immediately saying, "I don't eat plastic." So we've got these names for a lot of our sharks. And when you told me when I was at URI that I'd be naming sharks, I'd say, "You're out of your mind. We don't name fish, you know." Then they become pets, and people fall in love with them, and then if they die, you got a dead pet, and that's not a good thing. Well, I've learned since then, as I've gotten older, that when you name animals, it's a lot easier for people to relate to them, and therefore want to protect them, and then also perhaps want to sponsor research. So it actually has worked in our favor to name these animals. It also makes it really easy for me to call it Salty versus 32310-7. And memorizing the identification codes for each one of these animals is not easy. So Salty is also known as White Shark 1208, the 12th shark we identified during the population study. And I'll show you some of the photos. So as I told you, these animals, the seals in particular, start moving a little closer to shore as we get into late July, early August, because they figured out that hunting out here are some big white sharks. So then the sharks start to approach shore, and they start to get a little bit tighter as well. And then we follow them, and sometimes we find ourselves literally surfing over white sharks, which is, believe me, when you're in this position, is not the most comfortable position to be in, because the boat's moving quite rapidly, and you're suspended over a white shark, and you really don't want to fall in. And sometimes we do get wet. We literally have put the pulpit completely into the water, and we get soaked. And no matter what happens, I'm going to stay on the pulpit, believe me. And here's another shark that's starting to challenge itself and is moving into shallow waters to try to get in to hunt these seals. I love this sequence because it's not only shot by Wayne from the plane, but I'm on the pulpit holding a video camera. So he took 2 photos here, and what was going on is here you can see, like I mentioned, all those seals piled up in shallow water. All right, right here it's only about 4 feet deep. Well, this particular seal didn't get the memo that day and had been wandering in from offshore. This shark was going back and forth, back and forth. Suddenly the seal comes in from offshore, and the shark and the seal see each other. And in one split second, the shark reacts and goes after the seal. And this is a split second later. And I'll point out what you're seeing. This is the shark's dorsal fin. This is its mouth. Its jaws have come out and are clenched. The seal is actually on top of the shark, avoiding the bite of the shark. So the shark immediately launches itself after the seal. The seal's trapped and has only one place to go, and that is up, and is able to jump just a few inches higher than the shark does. And I've got all this on video, which I will show you at full speed and then at half speed. Really quite remarkable to watch. So now you'll see it in slow motion. The seal comes shooting out of the water. Right there, and the shark goes right after it. It was the first documented breach of a white shark in the North Atlantic. The seal ended up on the beach, healthy, happy, and there for a long time. Who's not rooting for the seal? All right. You will be a biologist, my friend. All right, here's some other photos that we took over last summer. 3 surfers and a white shark. Neither animal knew the other was there. And this is one of my favorites. White shark with a windsurfer. I met this guy 2 weeks ago. He was at a function I was at. He goes, "Hey, you know that windsurfer photo you got? It's me." I said, "How you doing?" He goes, I'm still windsurfing. I said, you are crazy. No, the sharks, so we're in this stage in the evolution of the shark's presence on Cape Cod, where we're balancing human activities with those of the sharks. And so one of the technologies we're using, the acoustic technology, is trying to answer questions as to the behavior of the sharks, so we can feed that into beach management that will allow to enhance public safety. So a lot of our research really right now is getting a sense of what do these sharks do when they're here, where do they spend their time, and is any of it predictable? And if it's predictable, we can then manage our beaches in a way that will minimize interactions. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk through the three technologies we're using, then I'm going to end with a final technology. And the first one is what we call acoustic telemetry. I already mentioned it with Frank Carey's work. Frank's tags have evolved to a new level. Frank's tag could ping for about a week. We now have tags that can go up to 10 years. And now we don't have to follow them in boats. Now we put out listening stations. And the sharks, when they swim past one of these listening stations, one of these receivers, the receiver has a built-in hydrophone, an ear, and it not only detects the presence of the shark, but it decodes who that shark is. And it says, and it logs the data, so it's a data logger. So basically what you get is, Salty was here last Sunday at 2 p.m. Then you go to those receivers, you upload those data, and you can recreate the movements of the sharks locally where you have these receiver systems. So we're setting up receivers over, off major swimming beaches, off seal haulouts, in harbors, estuaries, offshore, inshore. We're setting up these receivers, these acoustic arrays, to get a sense of where the sharks spend their time. And I showed you Salty's acoustic tag, but Salty swam by fairly quickly. So I'll show you Julia. And Julia is a shark that we tagged back in 2011. Another one. I don't need that. And you're going to see me drop the GoPro in the water, and we're up in Orleans. We're in Orleans here, and we're right off the beach in Orleans. GoPro's a wide-angle camera, so we're actually much closer than it looks. And you'll start to see the shadow of Julia right in this area. And then I'm going to put the camera, there's Julia right there, put the camera into the water, and you'll get a better look at her. There she is. She's in about 10 feet of water. And she's just cruising along the shoreline, hoping to encounter seals, following scent trails, probably listening, using all kinds of sensory cues to hone in on where these seals are. As you can see, we are in New England, which means our water clarity is not, Trinidad. So we are, and there's the acoustic tag right there on this shark. And that tag's going to ping away for 10 years. And I can tell you that Julia likes to come back each year around Memorial Day weekend, unless we had a cold spring, then she delays it by 2 weeks. That's how predictable we're getting with some of these animals. And Julia, unfortunately, did not return in 2015, which I think is interesting, because it means that as part of her reproductive cycle, she might not come back to Cape Cod. But that's purely hypothetical. So, give you a sense of what these tags look like once they're on the animal. And you get a range from the receiver of about 100 to 300 yards. So you know the shark is fairly close to that receiver when the receiver detects it. Now, if you're in a high noise environment, you're going to get less than that, 50 meters or less. If you've got a shark that's swimming into a harbor where there's plenty of noise, and we've had that happen, that receiver really is going to have much less range. So these are the sharks we tagged in 2015. We put out 24 of the 65 acoustic tags that we currently have out. These are our acoustic receivers. This is about the size of them, right? And you can see that some areas are very well covered. We have Orleans, Chatham, we have some in Truro. Those areas are well covered. We've wired up parts of Buzzards Bay, but not way up inside, which I'm sure you guys are most interested in, as am I, being a resident of this town. We've got receivers that we've expanded up to Situate, Duxbury, as well as Plymouth, Wellfleet, Provincetown, and we've just received funding in the last few months to totally expand this array even further. So I plan on putting one off New Bedford I will personally put one off of Sipicam Harbor. And we want to put some also on the eastern side of Buzzards Bay, as well as the North Shore, and then fill in some of these blanks that you see here. Right? These receivers are only about this big. Right? They're about $1,400, which, when it comes to electronics, is pretty cheap. The tags are only about $400, which again, in a relative scale, is pretty inexpensive. So we can get a lot of these tags out, and we can get a sense of where the sharks spend their time. So these are detections that we pulled off of the receivers in 2015. So we had 31,000 pings that were detected by our receivers, all those little red dots I just showed you. Okay, and those amounted to 31 different sharks. So this gives us the seasonality of the sharks around Cape Cod. We just plot the number of pings over time, and we can see that the big months around the Cape are really August, September, and October. And then it drops off very, very quickly. So we don't have the sharks around in May, and they're gone in early November. You may get one or two that hang around in December, and the winter months, they're out of here. Right? So automatically, this is one of the most simplest things you can get from acoustic telemetry data. We can take these data, and if you're a data geek like I am, we can start to plot out where we're getting these detections. So on every one of these receivers, I've filtered out the ones that don't hear white sharks. So every one of these receivers picked up white sharks. And in a couple of years when I come back, I'll probably be able to show you whether or not the ones we put in Buzzards Bay pick up white sharks. Anybody remember 2012, the big white shark washed up on the beach in Westport? Yep, Tommy, you remember that. I went down and cut that fish up. That is, the white sharks do occur in Buzzards Bay. And in 1936, anybody want to tell that story? That was the last fatal shark attack in Massachusetts by a white shark off of Mattapoisett. So I also thought it would be really interesting to put an acoustic receiver at that beach. But you can see that where we put receivers, white sharks will go. Okay, so here we have white shark detections, and we can take these data sets and even stratify them further, and I can break it down by town, and I can tell the town of Truro, these are the number of detections and number of sharks that we saw off the town of Truro, Orleans, and Chatham. This is the seasonality of them, so we can start to look at when the peaks occur. We can start to correlate these data with environmental parameters like temperature, time of day, tide. So this is the predictability I'm talking about, and this is the utility of the acoustic data sets. Let's go to satellite-based technology. So I can't wire up the Atlantic Ocean with acoustic receivers. It would be way too expensive, and I lose them. Because for those of you in the room who spend any time on the water, and that's probably most of you, everything you put in the water eventually goes away. It's either destroyed by the elements or tampered with. And so we lose receivers each year, and we can't wire up the Atlantic. It's impossible. So we need tags that will tell us where white sharks go when they leave Massachusetts. And there's two kinds I like to use. They're both satellite-linked tags. They give us a sense of the habitat these sharks use. They give us a sense of their horizontal and vertical movements, three-dimensional space. And one of these is called the pop-up satellite tag. It gives us really wonderful ecological information. It's a tag that you put on the shark, and this is a shark we tagged in 2004. Unfortunately, the tag failed. It's an expensive tag. It's about $4,000 now. That's come down a few $100. Nice of the manufacturer to do that. They're data loggers. They log temperature, depth, and light levels. And they do so every 10 seconds. So they amass this information and they just store it. And then they've got a clock built into them, and I can program the clock for any date and time I want, up to a year. And that clock then, the alarm goes off, the tag then detaches from the shark, floats to the surface, and transmits the data to a satellite. And they get emailed to me. Now, who would have thought of that 20 years ago? That is absolutely remarkable. That's remarkable to me. And so we've used a lot of these tags over the years to give us a nice sense of where the sharks go over broader scales. Now that doesn't do a lot for folks who want to see where sharks are going now. And some of you in the room may know we live in a society where people want things right away. And so You can go online and track birds, you can go online and track, whales and turtles, even some seals. But we have a real tough time doing that with fish because unlike all those other animals, fish don't breathe air. They don't have to come to the surface. And in order to communicate to a satellite, you need to come up to the surface. You got to break that air-water interface. You got to talk to the satellite, and you got to do that over the course of about 3 minutes. So a fish is not obligated to do any of that. But some fish do that. Some fish do come to the surface. So we collaborated with a group called O-Search in 2012 and 2013 to try to put these kinds of tags onto a big fish, namely white sharks. This is what one of those tags looks like. When a shark comes to the surface, and you all know this from Hollywood, the only part that comes out of the water is, of course, the dorsal fin. So when the dorsal fin comes out of the water, if the shark stays up long enough, it will transmit to a satellite. The satellite will calculate its position and then email it to me. And then we can put it up online within an hour or two and let you guys know where the sharks are. Not only is it really cool, people like to do that, they like to follow animals, and I think that's neat. But also in terms of public safety, there's some interest there because if you know where these sharks are going, you can know when they're approaching shorelines. So I'm going to show you a video of how we go about catching a big white shark, hauling it out of the water, and attaching one of these tags to the dorsal fin. I'm going to do this in about 40 seconds. So you've got to pay attention. We work with the O-Search. The O-Search is a big vessel with a big lift system. We use a very small vessel, a 22 contender, to go out and actually hook the sharks with a really big hook, because we don't want the sharks to swallow the hooks. So once the shark is hooked, we put this float near its mouth so the shark can be walked like a big dog right back to this lift system that's placed into the water. It's then guided up onto the lift, and once the shark is in the center of the lift is brought right out of the water. The shark's gills are irrigated with water so it's breathing, and we're also covering its eyes so it thinks that it's underwater and at nighttime, and the shark lays there. And then we take blood, we put a number of different kinds of tags on it, including that satellite tag, and we take tissue samples, we look at parasites, we do ultrasounds, and we do all of this in about 15 minutes. And we put the shark back into the water and it swims away. That's hard to do. And we've done it with 5 different sharks off the coast of Cape Cod and even one off Florida, white sharks. And it's remarkable what those tags, in addition to our pop-up satellite tags, have told us. So remember my little green dots, and then remember Frank Carey's original track, and this is what we've learned since then. And you can go to this website, O-Search, and see the movements of some of our sharks and the scope of these movements. The white shark, yeah, it's distributed from the eastern Gulf of Mexico all the way up into Canadian waters, but also is capable of really, really broad movements throughout all of the Atlantic Ocean. So think of that little track done in 1979 by the pioneer himself, and think of what technology has allowed us to really explode in terms of how we study these fish. And we've done this with white sharks and porbeagles and makos and blue sharks and threshers, and we've done it with a number of different species, from bluefin, giant bluefin tuna to swordfish. So what does that mean? As a scientist, it's hard to really tell. So what we do is we take data and we start to crunch them and look at what patterns emerge from it, right? So I got one pattern that's emerged, and it's from my friend Catherine. And there's a bulk of these sharks that actually do reflect what the green dots tell us. And that's a very simple coastal migratory pattern that extends from the eastern Gulf of Mexico up to Massachusetts and in some cases parts north, where the sharks are staying on the continental shelf, diving between the surface and the bottom's only between 100 and 200 meters deep. So, 300 to 600 feet deep, not deep. And they're just doing this very simple coastal migratory pattern. So, and we can track their movements around Cape Cod. You can see that Catherine came back to Monomoy, went up, wiggled her way across Route 6 in Eastham, got into Wellfleet in Cape Cod Bay, came back down to Monomoy, and before leaving in December of 2014, went to Falmouth, visit some friends, and then headed back down to Florida. So we get really good movement patterns from these data sets. And then we've got the other strange sharks, and it really only boils down to about half a dozen of them. And they're the ones that just go wherever they want. And Lydia is a really great example of this shark. Lydia, when we tagged her, decided to head out up to Newfoundland, and then toward Bermuda, and then out toward what we call the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And at one point, she even crossed into the Eastern Atlantic. And when she did this, all the tabloids in Europe went berserk saying a killer shark was bearing down on her. Which was really quite humorous. And so this is Lydia's pattern. I don't know why Lydia does this. But one of the things we learned from these two patterns is, as I mentioned, these are the dive patterns from these two sharks, all right? Catherine's very, very, very shallow. Okay, she's only going down to 100 meters, maybe 200 meters when she slips off the edge of the shelf, but very, very, very shallow. And these are the depths of Lydia. And Lydia goes down to depths as great as 1,000 meters. That's 3,000 feet, right? And she's doing these deep dives every day. And it got me thinking, why does Lydia do this? There's really lots to eat along the eastern seaboard of the U.S. There's plenty of seals. When you leave the Northeast, you've got dolphins, you've got porpoises, you've got whale carcasses, and you've got lots of benthic fishes, big fish, other sharks to consume. Why does a shark suddenly wander out, spend a ton of energy doing it, to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where she then begins to dive down to depths as great as 300 feet, exposing herself to very, very cold water temperatures, as cold as 38, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. And then going to the surface and getting really, really warm in 85-degree water? It's a great question, and nobody can answer it. Because it turns out that the more white sharks we put tags on, the more sharks we put tags on, the more we see these strange, deep-diving oceanic journeys. And the folks in the Pacific have been doing this in California now for about 40 years. They've only been applying these tags, which have been around for about 15 years, recently. And they're seeing that all the white sharks off California and Mexico head out to this place they call the Southern Offshore Foraging Area, or the White Shark Cafe, where they dive down to depths of 1,500, 2,000 feet every day. So they got the same kind of a question, but no one knows how to answer it. One scientist spent several $1 million, got a boat, submersible, went out there and tried to find a white shark. Proverbial needle in a haystack. Because the Pacific's a pretty big body of water, and so is the Atlantic. And even though there's lots of dots out there, it's really hard to find these sharks in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So I've been thinking a lot about how to solve this problem. This is a porbeagle shark, this is a basking shark, and this is a white shark. 3 species I've studied for years. You can see deep diving patterns in all of them. So it doesn't only apply to white sharks, it applies to a number of species. We see them in swordfish, we see it in bluefin tuna. This oceanic deep diving pattern. So I've pondered a lot with a lot of people at Woods Hole and other places about how do we go out and find a white shark and see what it's actually doing. And they all think I'm crazy because the cost of doing this, the probability of success is really, really low. Hire a big boat, get a submersible, and go find a white shark. But I was talking to my friends who work with autonomous underwater vehicles. And just think of these as underwater robots, all right? Drones. Think of them as drones. All right? And these drones are vehicles that we use to do things that we can't easily do. And some of the most obvious is you send a drone down to great depths to map the bottom, to see what the bottom looks like, what the texture of it, collect information about water temperature, a number of different oceanographic variables. Think of them as going to places that we can't routinely go. You hear drones all the time being used to find wrecks. All right, whether it be shipwrecks or when an air disaster occurs, try to find the black box. You send the drone down to those great depths because it's unsafe for humans, submersibles are too expensive, and it's finding needles in a haystack. Well, that's kind of what I needed, right? So I talked with these folks about how do we adapt one of these underwater vehicles, and these are all the different kinds that are made by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, to go out and find and follow a white shark. And they thought I was crazy simply because you can't train a vehicle to find a fish, let alone to follow it. And so we went back and forth quite a bit, and we decided, with help from Discovery Channel, it was a film we made a few years ago, to go and try to adapt this technology to follow fish. And the way we did it was actually not all that complicated, even though the software adjustments were indeed quite complicated. This is a small drone. It's about a 6-footer. It's called the Remus 100. It's the vehicle we've been using. Because Discovery Channel was involved, they obviously want us to film things. And so we adapted the nose cone of this to have a bunch of GoPros in it. And we adapted it to follow a shark. And how did we do that? Well, it turns out that the Remus 100 takes its orders from a transponder, which is an underwater modem system developed by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution that can communicate with the AUV. And I asked Woods Hole, I said, what do you do with this little underwater communicator? And they said, we just dangle it in the water and we communicate with the AUV and we send it messages like adjust your course or go 10 feet deeper or come home. I said, so when it comes home, what does it do? Well, it just follows communications with the underwater modem and it gets right back to us with great precision. I said, what if I took your underwater modem and put it on a shark? And they said, well, that would be really hard to do. I said, no, I'm pretty good at putting stuff on animals, you know? I'm pretty good at doing that. If I can't do anything else, I can put tags in sharks. And so we took this underwater modem system, which is about this big, and we sold the idea to Discovery Channel, and we went out, and we were going to attempt to put one on a shark and play this very sophisticated game of Marco Polo, which is really what it is. And think of it as the AUV, the drone going Marco, and then the little underwater modem, what we call a transponder, saying Polo. And then the AUV adjusts its course, its heading, its everything, to go find its depth, to go find the transponder. So we did this off of Cape Cod in 2012 with one of my favorite sharks, Large Marge. Large Marge is a 16-footer. And we put the transponder on her. Now the transponder wasn't developed to be towed by a shark. It was developed to be just dangled in the water. And because when we tow the AUV, it had to be towed, it was towed lengthwise. Well, it turns out the transponder's not set up to communicate well that way. So not only do we have to get it on the shark, but we had to get on the shark so it would be towed upright, which is really not hydrodynamic. And very difficult to do, to tow a tag this way. So we built this harness system and we got it onto Large Marge. And these are the first tracks ever of a marine animal by a drone. Not by Frank Carey in a boat, not by me in a boat, not by acoustic telemetry, but following it with a robot, which had never been done before. And what we were also able to do is not only follow it, but to actually videotape it as we got closer to it. Well, we made the film. The film was pretty good, and Discovery Channel really liked it. And when Discovery Channel likes something, they start to reach into their deep pockets to pay for things. And they decided, well, you know what? We want you to take this technology to the next level. And I said, okay, that's going to cost a lot of money. And they said, well, we're willing to do that, but you're not doing it in Cape Cod because we can't see anything. Any divers in the room? You dive in Cape Cod much? Yeah, you do. But you prefer not to. You probably do it to, fix moorings or maybe get some scallops or something like that. But boy, I used to dive, but I don't as much anymore. Yeah. I wonder why. They wanted us to go to Guadalupe Island. And Guadalupe is a beautiful little island off the coast of Mexico, about 100 miles offshore. Very, very, very remote, where there's beautiful, crystal clear water. Vinny's been there. You haven't been there, have you? Not yet. That's in your bucket list. Yeah, Vinny's been there. You didn't go with him.
No.
Of course not, right? Yeah. But, tell them. It's an amazing place to see white sharks.
Absolutely.
Because the visibility there has got, can be as much as, 200 feet on a great day. And when you get 200 feet of visibility, you could see a heck of a lot with the drone system. So we took the whole setup to Guadalupe Island in 2013, and we decided to track white sharks. Now, the big mystery about white sharks in Guadalupe Island is, there's lots and lots of seals. Lots of seals all over the beaches. There's lots of seals. There's Guadalupe fur seals. There's northern elephant seals. Big 1,000-pound elephant seals. There's little fur seals, California sea lions. They're all lining the beaches. And there's scientists that are out there every day for 6 months. and they've never seen a white shark, which are all over the place, eat a seal. And so I was talking to one of my colleagues that works there, Mauricio Hoyos, and Mauricio said to me, he goes, I'd love to know what these sharks do when they're not around the boats, because we never see them eat seals. And I said, what do you think they're doing? He said, the water's so clear here that the seals see them coming. And when you think about predators and prey, you got to think about detectability, you know? If the person, you know, that's after you, you can see them, well, the chances of you seeing them, you know, the chances of them getting you after they see you are much lower than if they sneak up on you. And with great visibility, the sharks need to sneak up. So I said, what do you think they're doing? He goes, there's so much visibility that I think the sharks are attacking their prey deep. I said, deep? Yeah, because the water plummets to great depths. Within a mile of the shoreline, the water goes from, you know, the shoreline to 10,000 feet deep. And these sharks, when they're not around these boats, because there's a lot of tourist operations, boats are putting cages out, people are getting in the water, photographing them, filmmakers are there, their scientists are tagging them, and then these sharks disappear, and nobody knows what they do. And Mauricio thought they go and hang out in the depths. And they go down to dark water where they can't be seen, and they wait for the seals to come out to them. And then they ambush them vertically in the water column. So he wanted us to try to see that and to demonstrate it. And I said, that's going to be really tough to see. You know, we got to be following a shark and then see it attack a seal at depth. And our little AUV here can only go down to about 300 feet deep. Otherwise, it would implode. And so we went out there and we did a number of missions over the course of 2.5 weeks. And I'll show you some short videos, and this will be the conclusion of the talk. This is our boat. This is the tagging of a shark that's thought to be one of the biggest sharks ever seen, deep blue. And you'll see deep blue. This is a 21-foot boat, all right? So you'll see deep blue come around slowly. We're shooting this with a drone, another drone. We got one above us, shooting the whole thing for Discovery Channel. And you'll see me then put the tag as we tease the shark close to the boat with that bait. She'll come right by me, I'll pop the tag in, she'll go, oh, that's not good, and then she'll swim away. And then we'll launch the AUV from the mothership, and we'll follow the shark. Just to give you a sense of what we're capable of doing, not only with the technology to study these animals, but to film them as well. So the next sequence, and I think I'm going to need my glasses. Vinny's glasses, I should say. So this next sequence, we're going to go underwater. All right, we're going to go underwater, and you're going to see the view from the AUV. So this is the AUV as it moves along. It's about 300 feet deep. And what we didn't anticipate was what happened next. Oh. I'd say that's a white shark attacking at depth. I'd say it's a hungry white shark. Have you ever seen a marine engineer cry? I love this sequence because we were all extremely surprised by it. The shark was swimming below the vehicle. The vehicle was about 100 feet above it. And then out of nowhere, a different shark came up at amazing speed. Now watch this, I love this part. The shark follows it and goes, "Why haven't you died?" And then it shouts some kind of an expletive. Right here. It goes off on its merry way. So Mauricio was coming apart. He thought it was the most amazing thing. So I'll show you another sequence. Now this one's going to be all the cameras on the AUV. So you're going to be looking, some will be obvious. The forward one looks forward, up, down, right, left. And then there'll be one looking that's mounted below and looking down. Okay, so this is an attack by a shark called Lucy. And Lucy had not been seen around Guadalupe for many years because it was thought that a deformity in her tail would not allow her to feed properly. You'll see the deformity in her tail. That was probably caused by an interaction with another shark. So here are all the camera systems. Again, up, down, right, left, forward. And this one's pointing down and back. And you're going to see the vertical attack by Lucy in this area here as she approaches with remarkable speed with a tail that it doesn't look like it should work this well. Oh. Yeah, there you see the tail. Maybe the sound is... Yeah. That's the screaming of the vehicle. It's the motor of the vehicle picking up as it gets away. Tracking a shark, a randomly moving object, which is what these sharks are really, with a vehicle is remarkable, and it's a testament to Roger Stokey and Amy Fukuya's capacity to modify the software of this vehicle so it can make decisions. And that's what you need. No one else has ever done this before, because it's not easy to do. And so we did that next step, and that was all these steps are baby steps. And so when I give these talks to high school students and to college students, I talk about the advances in technology, what we're learning from it, and how science progresses in these very, very small steps. And how by tracking, doing these very short tracks of 3-4 hours, it won't allow me to go follow white sharks into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and see what they're doing at 3,000 feet deep. But it lays the groundwork for building on the technology to do that. Now, it may happen during my career, but it might not. It might be somebody in this room, one of these kids who goes into this and decides they want to follow in my footsteps and actually track a white shark to a remote part of the Atlantic and see what they do. But we did that in 2013. We did another film in 2015 where we brought a much bigger vehicle, one that can go down to 6,000 feet, and we filmed remarkable things at night as well as at great depths. And that is going to, that's my little teaser, that's going to air on Discovery later this month in about 2 weeks. We're also using technologies now. We're actually putting camera systems on the sharks themselves. We did this last summer. This is my last slide. This is a clamp system. Put it on a shark, and we didn't know that the shark actually followed us. And when we looked at the video later that day, here's a view from the camera of our boat as the shark continued to follow us around. I already mentioned the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. We have raised enough money to now have a license plate. So you kids in the room who want mom and dad to have white shark license plate, really start twisting their arms. If you're not from Massachusetts, move here and get a license plate. If you don't like white sharks but you like striped bass and bluefish, we threw a couple of them on the plate as well. And they're coming out as we speak. So you can get the white shark license plate. And that actually raises a lot of money annually for us to do our research. So the Conservancy really is the nonprofit that has got it done for me. A whole bunch of other people, including Discovery Channel, which has funded a lot of my research over the years. And then if we have a couple books out. One of them I signed today for Nicholas, who is here, and that's my Shark Handbook, which a new edition is coming out this summer, which should be out in the next few weeks. And then this book launched this week. It's written by Cy Montgomery. It's part of a children's book series that she has done called The Great White. She talks about animals in every book. This one is The Great White Shark Scientist, and it features the research that we do off of Cape Cod. And it's a great book for children. It's a children's book. And with that, I will stop talking and let you guys ask some questions if you have any. And thanks so much for your patience and time tonight. Not too far over. If you guys have to go, I know it's after 8. I know there's some young kids here. If you have to take off, that's fine. I understand. Yeah.
I think it was today on NPR, there was a segment that mentioned the wonderful work you were doing, but it mentioned an app that
Yes.
is available to
We have developed an app.
farmers and fishermen and so forth. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, we have a new working with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. We have a new app being launched July 1st called Sharktivity app. And it's going to be free. And what you can do with it is you'll get the latest shark sightings as well as downloads from our receiver systems and satellite tags, so you can follow the movements of these sharks in almost real time. And it's to educate the public. It's also to notify them and give them a sense if they're going to a beach, if they've ever, shark sightings have ever occurred there. It's by no means the go-to place for public safety information. If there's no dots there, it doesn't mean that there's no sharks there, but it is a tool that the public can use, as well as town officials, to get a sense of where the sharks spend their time.
So can the public then report?
Public can report sightings as well. Tommy?
That's surprising to me that you showed me that sharks feed at 3,000 feet deep. That's in the total darkness. What sensors did I use to locate prey in total darkness? I thought sharks were...
Highly visual. The white shark is considered to be one of the most visual predators we have, right? Because it's got big eyes, it's a daytime feeder, so it surprised the heck out of all of us when we started seeing these deep diving patterns, because you're absolutely right, there's no light there. So it's going to rely heavily on electrosensory perception, most likely, and then olfactory, smell. You know, and my guess is it's harvesting in some really dense layer of biomass, whether it be fish or shrimp or something, in which case, you know, smell and electrosensory perception may help them best. But it's a mystery.
Just
Someday we'll follow the drone.
fascinating. Just fascinating.
Thanks, Tom.
What can you tell us about the shark that was in Hadley's Harbor about 8 or 10 years ago?
11 years ago,
11.
12 years ago, 2004, you saw a picture of it.
I saw it up there, that's what I was asking.
Oh, you got a chance to see it?
Yeah.
We never saw that shark again. But we had 2 weeks with that shark, as you know, and it was a very interesting experience because it was the first indication that white sharks were coming to this area consistently. It surprised that at the time I was living on the vineyard, and it really surprised all of us in the scientific community as well as I think the general public. This shark wandered into this small estuary and it stayed there for 2 weeks. It could not get out. We actually had to force it out, which was creative. I mean, I do a whole talk on this, so I'm not going to bore you with it now. I put a satellite tag in it, and I watched that within 2 hours of meeting that shark, it was tagged. I watched that tag on that shark. It was working perfectly for the 2 weeks. 45 minutes after we get it out, that tag malfunctions and detaches. She remembers what I was like that day. That had happened. Yeah. Where's the key to the gun cabinet?
I love OSA. Totally fun to watch. And Mary Lee has been like over 3 years reporting, isn't it now? How long do you think Mary Lee may report? How long do
Maybe another year.
Really?
We tagged her in 12, so we're already, you know, we're already up on a 4-year anniversary almost. So if we can get another year out of that tag, we'll be lucky.
Is that all onboard stored energy? Is there any sort of solar regeneration?
No, it's no solar or anything. It's just all lithium battery.
Really?
Yeah. But it only transmits when the shark is at the surface. So it's got a wet-dry switch that initiates transmission. And that allows for battery to be stored and not used, you know.
Two-part eating question. Do you know, or maybe it's commonly known, how many seals a white shark would eat during the months
That's
that
a
it's
good
at around the Cape or whatever?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what scientists like to do when they talk about the bioenergetics of an animal, you know, how does this animal live and what does it need to fuel its system, and you know, what goes into growth, what goes into reproduction, what goes into X, Y, and Z. And, you know, so they do these energy budgets and they do these calculations and they come up with a hypothetical. And the hypothetical, and Frank Carey was one of the first people to come up with a hypothetical for a white shark. He said a white shark doesn't need to eat more than once a month.
Oh.
All right? Somebody came out 15 years later and said, no, it's actually once every 2 months, based on metabolic rates and all those kinds of things. And then somebody came out about 1.5 years ago and said, no, it's probably closer to 2 weeks. So these theoretical models are really useless. So how long can we go? 10 days? Without eating? I don't know. Without eating, we can go a certain amount of time. Okay, but who in the room here eats only once every 10 days, right? So I went to some of my South African colleagues and I said, you guys watch sharks eat seals every day. How many of you ever seen a shark eat in a single day? He goes, I've seen sharks eat as many as 6 or 7 seals a day.
Wow.
So, you're at the buffet table.
Yeah.
You look around, what the heck? You get a little bit more of the, king crab legs, whatever. I'm not gonna eat them. So.
Then the other part was, you were talking at one point about the shark swimming along and sensing where the seals are and wanting to, or I don't know, making a plan or whatever. Now, if a person was in the water, is there a reaction on the part of the shark to that, or are they sort of keyed into the seals, or?
They really seem keyed into the seals because I've got a number of stories from surfers who've been sitting on their boards waiting for the next good set, and a seal gets taken out next to them.
Mm-hmm.
One guy claims that he was splattered with blood, all right, being that close. Now, it's a surfer.
Yeah.
So they have a tendency to not only speak in their own language, but to make stuff up. Fishermen, surfers. So you got it, but let's say it's within 50 yards, right? That's still, you got 10 surfers lined up and you pick the seal. That's really remarkable in terms of selectivity.
Yeah.
And so we haven't had these attacks, any attack. We had one attack in 2012, and that was not a serious attack. That wasn't a shark saying, I'm going to eat that person. That was a shark going, what's this? And I don't have hands to grab it, so I'll just mouth it. Well, you don't want to be mouthed by a shark. And that's what happened in 2012. Sure. So what we're seeing so far is remarkable selectivity. What I fear most is probably the inexperienced shark or the younger shark in a competitive environment going, oh, I got to eat. And there's another shark there and there, and it just shoots, and then it's a surfer.
Yeah.
Good guy.
I want to know, how dangerous are white sharks to other white sharks?
Oh, pretty dangerous. We see a lot of animals that are heavily scarred up. Every shark we see has got scars on it from seals or from other sharks. So these animals, when you got a 12, 14, or 18, 16-foot shark swimming next to you, you see those scars, and these animals, by the way, we've done the age and growth work, they live up to 70 years. So I look at these big female white shark, Marge. Marge is one of my favorite. She's got these giant scars, and I feel like saying to her, "When'd you get that one?" She said, "Oh, I got it in the '60s." It's just amazing stuff. They can only talk. See that scar there? 47. That's really cool. But they're all scarred up.
If there was a white shark and another kind of shark, would a white shark try to attack it?
Entirely possible, yeah. Yeah, sharks eat other sharks. Sharks eat other sharks. I cut open a 960-pound mako shark in Nantucket and pulled out a 6.5-foot blue shark from its belly. So sharks will eat other sharks, and there's no doubt whites will do the same. All right, we'll do a couple more. Yeah, let's start.
What's the food chain like out there with the seal population exploding like it is? Is something else going to tip somewhere?
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of, a lot of it's based on theoretical modeling with bad data sets, so it's really hard.
Yeah.
So we want to take an ecosystem approach. We're looking at these things going, okay, we got to know every level of the food foraging web, right? And then you got to estimate its abundance and then what the potential impacts based on diet data of one group to another, and it really is quite complex. But there are indications that if you pull this from the system or disrupt that part of the system, you get this that happens or this that happens. There's a lot of variance in those models, and then you've got climate change implications too, which everybody's screaming about, that could also throw the whole thing off. So there's a great push in that direction, but I actually do not believe that anything's come out. The fishermen will tell you it's all messed up. The seals are destroying everything. And they're probably, there's some truth to every statement. There are people who say the seals are the most wonderful things on earth, we love them. And there are others that say, well, I can't stand them. And it's a real problem. We're competing with them, they're taking all the fish, they put worms in the fish, all that stuff. But it's really it's a highly contentious issue and highly charged. But it's a great question, and there's no answer to it yet.
What's the longest great white that you heard of, and what have you measured as the longest that you've talked about?
Well, 21-footer that was captured in Cuba. Yeah, I want to say in 1961, I want to say, but I have to go back. There's a wonderful photo of it with a whole Cuban village sitting on it. It's really quite comical. But there they are. I mean, and this is giant fish, and they say that that was the largest white shark ever measured. But then some scientists said no, he doesn't think it was because it was actually only 20 feet. But the biggest I've ever seen was deep blue, and I put deep blue in the 20-foot category. The largest I've seen here is Curly, and she was about 18 foot. She was feeding on a dead whale carcass about 8 miles east of Chatham Inlet in 2010.
Good job on the sun, by the way.
Yeah. I work my best.
Aside from the diving, do the sharks follow any kind of temperature gradient so that they're seasonally or anything?
Yeah, we think that season impact influences their movements here and their departure. You see that nice bell curve with my acoustic detection data. It's, basically they show up beginning in June and they leave by, end of November, which really correlates quite well with water temperature. But then you see these other sharks that wander into the Atlantic and traverse a remarkable temperature range that goes from 39 degrees to 86.
Would they be like out in the Gulf Stream in November or December if regardless if they went far, if they found the Gulf Stream warm water, in other words?
Yeah, but they really are, when we average all the data, they really are more of a cold water fish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're more of a temperate species. You don't see them throughout the Caribbean, and they do like this deep diving. Some people say they go deep to stay cool, and then they come up to warm up, and so they're regulating their body temperature by moving up and down. I think that's a lot of energy to spend to do that. I think they're feeding at depth. I just like to know what they're doing, what they're feeding on. All right, if you have any other questions, come and see me. Otherwise, I'll let you guys go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.